Hey everyone, I have something really special to share with you. I'm hosting my first ever virtual tarot conference this summer that I know you're going to love. It's called the Summer Solstice Summit, and it's happening the weekend of June 20th. It's going to be a 3-day online gathering filled with tarot, astrology, shadow work, creative ritual, and all things witchy wellness. I've brought together 15 incredible presenters, folks I truly admire, ranging from therapists who are using tarot therapeutically to psychologists, astrologers, and of course, some of the most innovative tarot thinkers. All of these folks will be leading workshops and presentations designed to nourish your spirit and deepen your tarot practice. So, whether you're new to using tarot, especially as a tool for self-discovery and healing, or if you've been on this path for years, this summit is meant to meet you exactly where you are. And everyone is guaranteed to walk away with some healing witchy wisdom. I hope you'll join us for the Summer Solstice Summit. Go ahead and visit thetarotdiagnosis.com/summer solstice to get your weekend pass. You are listening to The Tarot Diagnosis. I'm your host, Shannon. I'm a licensed psychotherapist, and I also happen to have a love for tarot. Each episode, I invite you to reflect with me as I work to demystify the tarot and the human experience, all while exploring tarot's connection to mental and emotional health. While this podcast may feel therapeutic, it is not meant to take the place of psychotherapy. So grab your cards and join me as I work to create a pathway to better understand ourselves and those around us. Today's episode was inspired by a social media trend, actually, that's been going around. And you might have seen it. And it's usually got an image or just, someone hanging out with text over it saying something like, I probably just needed a hug, so I became a therapist. Or I probably needed a hug, so I became a nurse. Or insert, some type of healing profession. And it super resonated. And it reminded me of a Carl Jung quote that says, we're all wounded healers, which was actually the inspiration behind this episode's title, The Wounded Caretaker. And that social media trend inspired me to talk about this very specific caretaking experience on Instagram. And unfortunately, it was actually incredibly relatable to many of you, which, I'm not entirely surprised about. And this is actually something I feel like I've been exploring a lot lately in my therapy practice with my clients. But anyway, on this Instagram post that I made, I kind of highlighted and summarized what this experience was of being a wounded caretaker. I said, when your needs go unmet in childhood, you're more likely to become an adult who prioritizes taking care of others over taking care of yourself. This can lead to resentment because you're still longing to be cared for in the process. And yeah, that really hit for a lot of you. And these types of unmet needs and this dynamic can really stem from all kinds of family situations. But today I want to explore one specific scenario, and that's becoming a caretaker as a child and the impact that inevitably has on us as adults. So it was interesting when I posted on social media because the card I chose to represent this experience of being the wounded caretaker was the Queen of Pentacles. And someone actually commented and asked what that card had to do with the statement I was making about caretaking. And I was confused for a second by the comment because to me, it felt obvious. But then I remembered I don't always take tarot literally. And I chose the Queen of Pentacles for several reasons. To me, she's the ultimate caretaker of the entire deck. I know most people might think of the Queen of Cups, and I totally get that. But I see the Queen of Cups as like the counselor, the confidant. And the Queen of Cups also prioritizes her own well-being and allows herself to receive care from others. At least in the upright position. Of course, it's a whole other episode and discussion if she's reversed. But the Queen of Pentacles, on the other hand, I feel like upright and reversed can get really wrapped up in the everyday caretaking and emotional caretaking. So beyond the Queen of Cups, this is also about just making sure everything gets done for everybody around you. And it can really become this Queen of Pentacles' entire identity. And I guess just a disclaimer here. Yes, tarot is projective. And yes, I am absolutely projecting right now. So yeah, let's talk about the experience of this caretaker mentality and kind of explore the psychology behind it while also bringing tarot into the mix. So there's a term that I want to discuss first, and that's parentification. Some of you might be familiar with this. Some of you might not be. That's totally okay. But parentification happens when a child is placed in a position of caring for others instead of them being cared for. And this could look like maybe having to emotionally support a parent or having to raise younger siblings, manage household tasks and chores. And this is beyond just the kind of standard chores that children should be learning to do to become adults. It's, having to worry about getting groceries at, 10, 11, 12 years old, making sure, your siblings have been fed and bathed and eaten, those types of tasks and responsibilities that no small child should be managing. So that's what I mean when I talk about parentification. There's also the experience of having to be the strong one that we see in kids who've experienced this as well. So whatever the specific scenario, the message is always the same. And when you're parentified, you start to internalize this message that my needs don't matter as much as everybody else's. And even if that statement was never directly spoken, it's still deeply implied through how the child is treated and what their experience is in the household or with other caregivers. And something I just want to state too is usually this experience isn't something that the caregivers are doing intentionally. They're often not trying to intentionally harm through the experience of parentification. There's so many things that could be going on and happening that lead to this. So just at least wanted to state that. So moving on to this experience of realizing, oh, I feel like my needs don't matter as much as everybody else's. That belief that you experience in childhood doesn't disappear when you become an adult. In fact, it usually intensifies. So you might find yourself always putting others first, being the helper, the rescuer, the fixer, the one who keeps everything running smoothly. You're the one that everybody depends on, runs to, calls first. You're just everything for everybody. But deep down, you're probably feeling exhausted. You're probably feeling lonely. And then eventually this leads to a quiet resentment, which can be really detrimental to our relationships. Because while you're busy meeting everybody else's needs, no one's meeting yours. And there's also an issue there too, because while no one's meeting your needs is because you don't know what your needs are and no one else has the opportunity to meet your needs, which we'll get into a little bit later in the episode. But that's really kind of this deep hidden pain of the early caretaker, because the reality is you didn't stop needing love, attention, support, and care as a child and now an adult. You just learned how to push all of those needs away and put them in a container so they are not accessible, not easily seen. But the reality is too, they're still there. Those needs and those desires and those kind of core spaces that need to be tended to still exist. And because you probably had little to no interactions growing up that told you your needs were just as valid, just as important as everybody else's, it can now feel really uncomfortable to actually have those needs met. It might even feel impossible to ask to have your needs met. And like I mentioned earlier, you might not even know that you have needs or what they are. So I see this all the time. I'll even ask clients, what do you think you need right now? Specifically clients who I know were parentified. And it's like a deer in headlights. They're just sitting there going, I have no idea. Like, I don't even know. It's hard for them to even comprehend and grasp what it would look like or sound like to say, I need blank, insert need here. And this experience gets even more layered when we look at it through the lens of identity development. Because when parentification starts young, it doesn't just shape our behavior, it shapes our whole identity because we start to identify with the role of the caretaker. So going back to that meme that inspired this whole episode, that sentiment of, I needed a hug, so I became a therapist, or I needed a hug, or probably needed a hug, so I became a nurse. It again shows how deep this caretaker mentality runs, and it becomes our identity. So because that's what we knew growing up and what we identified with, then we find ourselves in roles later on in life that just continue to reinforce that identity. And you might hear me giggling through all of this because this is me. This isn't something funny to talk about. I'm just like deeply aware that I am very much talking about myself as I explore this. And it's a little uncomfortable. And sometimes I laugh when I'm uncomfortable. So that's what's going on there. But anyway, that identity of being the caretaker gets reinforced throughout our life because we're living it. And that reinforcement that happens over and over again is usually through positive feedback from caregivers or just other people in positions of authority. And that reinforcement just drives the message home that you exist to take care of other people. And when a child's own needs are then ignored or invalidated, they start to internalize that core belief that their value lies in what they can do for others, not in who they are, just inherently as a human. So this archetype of the wounded healer that I mentioned earlier is a really fitting kind of symbolic framework because these individuals grow up to become kind of emotional anchors in all aspects of their life, in romantic, platonic, and professional relationships. And like I said, we often enter helping fields, caregiving roles, or find ourselves in romantic partnerships where our needs are always kind of like pushed aside. They're in the peripheral. We're really focusing on making sure that we're just like taking care of our partner, or taking care of the kids or family or friends. But beneath the surface of that level of awareness of other people's needs and this compassion that we naturally have is a sense of grief that we don't speak about. And it's that longing to also be seen, to also be cared for and nurtured and emotionally held, all of which were likely absent growing up. Another important component here too about the reinforcement I was talking about a second ago is you may even have received praise for caretaking that you interpreted as love. And then we could even get into the whole like neurobiology of like the chemicals that fire when we start to feel good or we're interpreting something as love, which I did a whole episode on toxic is intoxicating. And I talked a lot about intermittent reinforcement. This is kind of similar to that, at least in the way that the brain functions. So feel free to go take a listen there to dive more into the neurobiology of all of that. But yeah, so we can easily interpret this praise of meaning love. And so you could see how easy it is to fall into this caretaking cycle. Because if you're seeing praise for caretaking as love or praise for ignoring your own needs in order to make sure someone else's needs are taken care of as love, then of course you're going to caretake more because that's how you get that need for love met. It's the only way that you're getting it met right now. So yeah, even if the dynamic is transactional and based, entirely on someone else's needs, your brain and your body are like, oh, I must keep doing this. Another experience, though, kind of in opposition to what I just described, is someone who might cringe at the idea of receiving praise for caretaking. You might think, well, yeah, that's what I'm supposed to do. Don't recognize me for it. And that kind of fits within that identity development framework that I mentioned earlier. And this is where actually the archetype of the devil comes in because, you know, I feel like we tend to only look at the devil card through one specific lens. And a lot of people are kind of like put off by it because, it's viewed as the addiction archetype or bad negative behavior. It also just represents negative influence and destructive patterns of behavior, which is exactly what I'm talking about here. This is destructive patterns. But another component of the devil archetype too is this feeling of resentment. And this cycle that I'm talking about can just exude resentment. Of course, we might not always be consciously aware of it. But, the adult who continues to prioritize others, again, finds themselves increasingly exhausted and also in a space of silently, silently being the key word here, hoping that someone will finally notice just how tired they are and finally kind of come to their rescue and offer them the care that they likely never received or the type of care that they've continued to give other people. The interesting component here, though, is that they then often reject that help because they learned, especially in childhood and maybe even reinforced in adolescence and adulthood, that needing is bad, that it's dangerous, that you're a burden. And so this tension that then kind of bubbles up to the surface there between this need, drive, and desire to be cared for, along with this kind of internalized message and belief and sense of identity that they must remain the one caretaking, remain invulnerable, for example, ends up becoming the hallmark of disorganized attachment. And disorganized attachment, of course, being characterized by the need for connection, yet fearing connection at the same time. And it just leaves us stuck in this unresolved loop of, it's very much a like tug of war internally and externally sometimes. There's a great amount of research actually on this topic. In fact, a lot of my focus in grad school was specifically on dynamics and experiences like this. And there's a study from 2008, which I'll link in the show notes, that found individuals who experienced this level of emotional parentification were significantly more likely to struggle with anxiety, depression, and also difficulty with intimacy in adulthood. So again, there's that disorganized attachment probably coming into play, maintaining healthy, stable relationships difficult. And so these folks also report difficulty in identifying and expressing their own emotional needs, which I mentioned earlier. And usually because they have spent years or their whole life attuned to the emotions and needs of others. And there's a real paradox that exists here because this caretaking and giving has really become their identity. And that's how they know how to exist in the world. And so because it's how they exist in the world, the more that they just exist, aka give, nurture, caretake, the more they also feel unseen and uncared for and unnurtured. So we just get trapped in this cycle of caretaking that just over time continues to intensify and get stronger and deeper, and then increases our feelings of isolation, even though we might be around dozens of people taking care of all these people and people coming to us because, we offer a level of nurturance that they can't get from anywhere else. And yet we're left feeling so alone in the process. So yeah, the problem being the strongest person in the room is probably the one who needs the most care. So I would suggest those of you who are listening who, if this isn't necessarily you, pay attention in your friend group and your family. Who's the one who, is always making sure everyone else is taken care of? Maybe once in a while, go up and say, hey, let me do something for you. Or what do you need? They might not know, but even just the act of you saying, hey, what do you need might be enough to jolt them, which I'm going to get into how to hopefully step outside of this loop in a moment, but I want to talk more about tarot first. So the main tarot archetypes that I think exist within this experience, two I've mentioned already, of course, the Queen of Pentacles and then the Devil. But, we also have the Ten of Wands, which is a given here. This, visualization of literally carrying too much. It's the archetype of being overwhelmed by responsibility, but still continuing to go because you feel like you have to. And then also the Six of Pentacles. This is very much a card about giving and receiving. But when we look at it through the lens of parentification, it really speaks to that imbalance where, someone is just always giving and never in the position of receiving. And then we also have the Page of Cups. This is that inner child who, of course, growing up when the parentification started was very sensitive and, because of that sensitivity, very attuned to their environment and are still very much longing to kind of maybe go back to that place and have those wounds tended to. But this card and this archetype specifically is an invitation to reconnect with that part of ourselves. And it's also very much an archetype of being able to reparent those kind of emotional needs and tend to those emotional wounds. And then, of course, the star. This is kind of the ultimate symbol of healing. And it's a reminder that you are also allowed to take care of yourself. I love the imagery of the star for the depiction of vulnerability and tending to the self. So yeah, those I think are the main archetypes that represent this experience. So how do we start healing from all of this? That's the biggest question. So healing from this pattern and this dynamic isn't about stopping caretaking. It's not about not caring about other people. It's not about not giving anymore. It's just about including yourself in that cycle of caretaking, which I know can still be difficult. You hear me talk a lot about internal family systems on the podcast, IFS, aka parts work. There's just the whole concept and model of parts work really lends itself to being a great modality to help heal specifically with parentification and over caretaking, because it helps us to identify and then differentiate between our caretaker parts and our exiled parts, for example. And then through that process, that's when we can start that Page of Cups star type of reparenting again and being curious about what are our needs and how can we be gentle and tender with those needs, and maybe be curious about what it would look like to have those needs met by ourselves or by somebody else. Something else to remember here too is that breaking this pattern or breaking this cycle requires so much more than just standard surface level self-care. This isn't about, I'm going to make time to go get a pedicure, or I'm going to go make time to, take a walk. This is deeper than that. And it really demands looking at our identity and even exploring a reorientation of that identity. Because as a wounded caregiver, the task is about going into the self and naming, discovering those unmet needs of the child that you once were. And then also holding space for grieving the childhood that you were never able to have. It's also important to start small when you're doing this because it's really easy to get overwhelmed. So you could just start with some simple questions to ask yourself. And then, of course, pull some cards to help guide your responses. So the two questions that I think would probably be the most gentle to explore right now, if you're new to kind of diving into this dynamic and this cycle, is what do I need right now? Because that's the question that throws everybody off. And that's what we got to get comfortable exploring. And I like this question to pull cards to specifically because, those of us who resonate with this experience, again, might not even know what we need because growing up, we weren't given the space to be curious about that. We weren't given the space to discover it. And no one really tended to the needs we did have. So we learned to put them aside. And the cards are gentle nudges, gentle invitations to look in different areas or go in different directions that we may not have considered otherwise. So yeah, the first question, simple, what do I need right now? And then the second one is, how can I or somebody else tend to this need? So what I think I'm going to do, because I feel like I haven't actively pulled cards on the podcast in a little while, is I'm going to pull cards to these questions. And I guess for myself. So we'll see what happens. I'm a little nervous here, but I want to show you, what this would look like. Because I know I've had people reach out before, especially when I share spreads or suggest exercises or activities that have questions that say, who can or how can someone, and people might be like, oh, how do the cards tell you, who it is that's going to help you? And the idea here is to, tarot is a thought exercise. So when you look at a card, who do you think of? Is there a particular person, a community, a place? So we're going to do this together. We're going to process my own pulls. Okay, so what do I need right now? The Seven of Pentacles. Okay, interesting. Oh, and also I'm using the Joie de Vivre Tarot, which I have just been obsessed with lately. I'm loving it so much. It is just so sweet and whimsical and just everything that I need in my life right now. So what do I need right now? The Seven of Pentacles. This imagery is really beautiful. It's got these two, and I'm not even sure what these little creatures are. I might have to actually look in the guidebook to see what the artist describes these as. But it's a really beautiful image of this tree. And because, of course, in the Seven of Pentacles, traditionally, there's this plant with the Seven of Pentacles on it. And I actually love the image here because at the root and the base of the tree, kind of underneath the ground, it's either underneath the ground or just past this little stream of water here is a heart. I feel like that's special. So I'm going to sit with that for a second. I'm going to go ahead and pull the second card. So how can I or someone else tend to this need? Eight of Pentacles. Or in this case, the deck uses the word coins. So 7 of coins and 8 of coins. That's actually pretty interesting. I was not expecting to get the 8 of Pentacles or 8 of coins for this. Okay, so I grabbed the little white book that came with this deck, and I never do this because I always read so just intuitively, but I really wanted to know what the author called these little cute little animals in this image. And she says they're a pair of fairy deer, which is just absolutely adorable. And now it makes me kind of want to read to you like exactly what this author said about the 7 of coins, because actually reading the little white book for this deck made me think about this card differently for this prompt. So again, the prompt was, what do I need right now? So the author says, a pair of fairy deer, gratitude and honor, planted a tiny seed and nurtured their tree through its stages of growth. Their seed has grown into a bountiful monument of beauty and grace. They gaze at their tree, contemplating the rewards of their hard work. As ideas grow, they develop, and the outcome can bring great bounty, giving a sense of purpose and accomplishment. In the midst of working toward your goals, enjoy the process by reconnecting with your original intent. Immediately, there are words that stick out to me in this author's interpretation, and it's gratitude, honor, contemplation, hard work, and reconnection. So immediately, in terms of what do I need right now, this honor and gratitude, I think, is so potent and valuable because I think it's, thinking about, someone who is parentified very young and it becoming a huge part of my identity. I think it's so important to acknowledge and have kind of gratitude for my experience and honor the fact that everything that I had to go through and the way it shaped my identity kept me safe. So I think that's just an important kind of component here. So going back to the question of what do I need, something the author said also was really helpful when trying to figure out what this meant for myself, because they said, in the midst of working towards your goals, enjoy the process by reconnecting with your original intent. So I'm taking this to mean, okay, hey, I need to reconnect with, again, inner child. What is it that I never got to do growing up that maybe I'm curious about now? Or what are some things that bring me joy or make me feel nurtured and tended to that I need to spend some time doing? And I actually did this recently. For the first, or actually second time, I went to one of those cute little like paint your own pottery places. And yeah, I spent 2 hours there and it was glorious. And I painted, you might have seen it. I posted a story on Instagram a couple of weeks ago about my adorable little cactus coffee mug. I spent 2 hours just sitting there painting and my mind was absolutely blank. It was very, very meditative experience. And I think that this card is saying more opportunities and more time spent tending to those kind of parts of myself that I didn't have the time or space to explore when I was a child because I was taking care of other children when I shouldn't have been. So yeah, I actually really love the Seven of Coins for that. And so for the next question, how can I or someone else tend to this need is interesting because it's the Eight of Coins, Eight of Pentacles, which we might think, oh my God, stop doing. You don't need any more Eight of Pentacles in your life. But again, the artwork here is so cute. There's this adorable fox wizard who's wearing what the author calls a celestial cape of purple. And he's kind of just like mulling over his cauldron, toiling away at his potion, super focused. And there's such a playful energy about this. And I feel like it's the most playful Eight of Pentacles or Eight of Coins that I've ever seen. And I feel like it's a reminder to, not take things so seriously. So how can I tend to my need of the Seven of Coins by maybe tapping into some of the playful or childlike things that I didn't necessarily get to do growing up? I can remember to not take life or myself too seriously. So that was some personal insight into me. I would love to hear if you all pull cards to this, what comes up for you and what it was like to sit with this. But I also just want to remind you that this is not easy. Even for me, I challenged myself to pull cards about myself, about the situation on the podcast and really sit with it. But yeah, I just want to acknowledge that this is not easy, especially if you've built your worth around, being the helper, being the caregiver. So kind of stepping out of that and helping yourself and taking care of yourself can seem absolutely foreign. But it's so important to remember that you deserve this. You deserve your own tenderness. You deserve to be held. You're human. You have the same needs as everybody else. And, this whole process isn't about giving up who you are. It's not about abandoning your giving nature or your caretaking identity. It's just about including yourself in the process. Thank you so much for listening to the Tarot Diagnosis. For more tarot and mental health content, follow the Tarot Diagnosis on Instagram. You can also subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode and sign up to receive the Tarot Diagnosis emails where you'll have access to exclusive spreads and exciting announcements. To join an incredible community of tarot and psychology enthusiasts, join the Tarot Diagnosis membership community, The Symposium, by visiting thetarotdiagnosis.com.